be ready.
Okay. Hi, so my name's Matt Hodson, and the purpose of this talk is to make sure you get the best results from your chiropractic care. Make sure that you're not undoing the things that we're doing here in the clinic, and also to give you some advice around things that you can really accelerate the results that you're getting. I mean, if it was all just about information, then we'd all be billionaires with six packs. But unfortunately, what we have to do is actually implement that information in order to be able to make the changes that we should be making so that we can live as healthy and have a great and productive life and be happy. So my background is I studied for a Bachelor of Science in Anatomy and at New South Wales University, and then I completed a master's degree in chiropractic at Macquarie University. While I was at university, I got into mountaineering, and so I would go over to New Zealand and I'd go ice climbing in the summer holidays and winter holidays. And then once I graduated, I was offered a position where I could work in a number of different clinics in England and Ireland and Scotland and work all around, and then be able to ride my motorbike down to the French Alps and go ice climbing. And it was a real passion. It was something that I loved doing, and I did that for a number of years. And then I was working in Northern Ireland, on the north coast of Northern Ireland, and I was involved in a motorcycle accident. So someone came around the wrong side of the road, and I ran off and I ran into a cliff. Now I was unconscious for just over a month, and I was in an induced coma essentially, and I had multiple injuries. I fractured my spine in a number of places, and I ended up paralyzed from the chest down. So I had metal rods put into my spine to stabilize the spine. At the same time, I broke most of my ribs and my lungs collapsed, and I had a ventilator. So I had a hole in my throat, and I had a machine that was breathing for me while my lungs repaired, and I had numerous tubes coming out of my chest to drain things away. I also fractured my jaw, so I had a metal plate put in my jaw. I smashed my knees, I had my kneecaps removed. I tore open my abdomen, so I had rupture of the spleen, and I had internal abdominal injuries, so I had operations for those as well. I had my kneecaps both smashed, and they were removed. So I was in hospital for just over 18 months, and once I got out of hospital, I came back to Australia, and I was offered a position where I could work at New South Wales University in the Department of Medicine as a tutor. So I was tutoring medical students and science students about anatomy, neuroanatomy, visceral anatomy, and then I was offered a position at Macquarie University as a clinical supervisor. So I worked teaching students clinical skills in terms of their assessment and care of people, and I also worked as a supervisor looking after them when they were looking after people from the public to make sure that they were doing what was right. So once I got back into practice, my real passion was for family practice, and my driving passion at the moment, given that I've got a young family, is looking after whole families. So if we talk about health, so what does health actually mean to you? When I ask a lot of people that people will say, well, health is about being able to do what I want to do without any limitations. And that's a great definition. The definition of health by the World Health Organization is optimal physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being, and not just the absence of disease or infirmity. But when we think about health, what are the systems or the parts of the body that you think about actually ensuring that your body is functioning at the best? So I think one of the main systems we're all taught to look out for is our heart and cardiovascular system. It's very important for our health, very important for our energy levels. And then the next one that's really come into vogue in the last few years is digestive health. We know that your gut has a massive role in terms of your feeling of well-being as well as your absorption of nutrients. And the last one is obviously lung health as well, and that often goes along with heart health. But where do we hear about the nervous system? Because it's your nervous system that actually controls and coordinates the function of all of these other systems. So without your nervous system functioning optimally, you can eat well, you can exercise great, but if your nervous system is not functioning optimally, whatever you're doing in those lifestyle changes, your body's not actually going to be able to respond and get the most out of those processes. So when we think about a chart and we look at a spectrum of people going from 0 to 100, so anything above 50 means that you're functioning relatively well and you don't have any actual symptoms. This is just an example. Anything below 50 means that you may have some sort of a symptom. So that could be a cold or a flu, it could be stomach ulcers, it could be diabetes, it could be cancer. So if we're at 60 and we're classed as healthy, we have no symptoms, would you say we're healthier or sicker than if we're at 80? Now, obviously, we pose this question in this way because the way that we're taught is that if we don't have symptoms, we don't have a problem. And then we're taught that if we have a symptom, then we should go and see someone to address that symptom. But we know that the majority of the problems that really affect people's life in a major way, things like heart disease and cancer and diabetes, they develop to a substantial extent, often before we actually get any symptoms. So if we're waiting until we get symptoms, then often we're waiting until things are too late or until things have progressed to the point where we need something quite dramatic to intervene. So the aim of this process and what we're talking about today is to actually get you to go as far up towards 100 as you want to, or as we can get you, given your resources and your time and your motivation. So what is health and what does health mean to you? So the definition of health is optimal physical, mental, emotional and social well-being, and not just the absence of disease or infirmity. And when we think about our body, how our body heals, nearly all of the cells in our body have a lifespan. If I brush my hand, I brush off thousands of dead skin cells, but that's fine as long as new skin cells are coming through to replace the old, sickened, run down and dying cells. Now, your stomach cells last 30 days, your liver cells last 90 days, your blood cells last around 80 days, even your bone cells last 18 months. So as you're sitting here, your blood cells are dying, but that's fine as long as new healthy ones are coming through to take place of the old, run down, sickened and dying cells. So in that way, we need to think about our health in terms of how well is our body replacing the cells and what's happening in our lifestyle causing some of the cells to deteriorate quicker than they should. And your life is always in that balance. So as a chiropractor, one of the things that we talk about is what's called innate intelligence. And innate intelligence is basically that your body has an inborn intelligence that drives it towards health. If you cut your finger, you destroy some cells, right? But those cells they're replaced by healthier, better cells to cause that cut to repair. So in that way, nearly every cell in our body has this innate intelligence. And one way I think of innate intelligence is, if you've ever sat down and watched a movie and ate a whole tub of Sara Lee ice cream, it's pretty hard to do, but then you can do it. But then if you try and eat a whole kilo of apples, I would say that would be much, much harder. And the reason is that the apples have innate intelligence. The apples are alive. And so when we digest them, that sends signals to our brain that we're getting the nutrients that we need. Whereas, the ice cream doesn't give us those signals. So we're able to just keep munching away and eventually go, oh, where did that whole tub go? So whether that's good for us or not. So innate intelligence is in every living thing. And in order for the living things to be able to function well, that innate intelligence needs to be expressed through your nervous system to all the different cells, tissues in your body. As a chiropractor, there's a condition that we talk about that's called vertebral subluxation. Now, a subluxation is actually where your brain loses its control over the movement of certain areas of your spine. Think of it like driving an old car and you can drive and wobble the steering wheel and the wheels don't move. So this is what happens with a subluxation. The irritation to the nerves causes excessive and abnormal movement in your spine, and your brain reacts to that by trying to modulate the nervous flow that goes through those nerves. So when that happens, whatever that nerve supplies is not going to function the way that it should. So it's not that there's actually a vertebra that's squashing a nerve. We know that doesn't happen. It's basically that your brain loses that control, and that affects whatever that nerve supplies. So if that nerve supplies your leg, that leg's not going to function as well. If it supplies your intestines, we know that it's going to affect the communication from your brain to those intestines. And so when we look at the x-ray behind us, if you look at the hole at the top circle, you can see that's normal, and that's normal for the nerve to come through, and those nerve impulses are expressed fully. Whereas if we look at the nerve space at the very bottom, you can see that there's much less space for the nerve there. And that's going to affect the way that nerve communicates with that part of your body, as well as how that nerve communicates what's happening up to your brain. And that's how a vertebral subluxation affects you. So most of us will come to a chiropractor because we've had back pain or neck pain or headaches, but the purpose of your chiropractic care is not to just get rid of your aches and pains, but to actually get control of this vertebral subluxation complex so that your brain is functioning better and your nervous system is allowing your body to heal and repair at a better rate. And the side effect of that is that your symptoms will go. So essentially what we're talking about with a subluxation is that your brain is not able to communicate with your body. And when that happens, your body will try to adapt. And so we'll have a change in terms of a breakdown of the tissues, and then eventually we'll get symptoms. Now what you need to realize is that our body is designed to be able to survive and keep functioning even when we're not functioning optimally. So the tissues can break down to a substantial extent before we actually get symptoms. And in terms of things healing, often, things will heal somewhat, but if there's still tissue damage, we're still not working out the best that we can. If you think about your stomach, and if you've got problems with digestion, and you take an antacid to cover up the indigestion that you're getting, nothing's been done to actually correct the reason why the acid is being excessively produced, or why your stomach is reacting to that acid when we take an antacid. But if we can improve the function of the stomach, improve that nervous system, then we know that you're actually going to be functioning at a better rate. Okay, so this is a slide that shows the cross-section of a nerve. And so when we look at a nerve, you can see that there are motor nerves that get the muscles in our body working. There are autonomic nerves that supply all of the processes that are automatic that we don't have to think about. And then there's a small amount of nerves that are dedicated to pain and posture. So the pain and posture nerves make up less than 10% of the nerves in our nervous system. And so really, if we're just relying on pain as an indicator of how healthy we are, we're not really looking at how the rest of our nervous system is working. So when we talk about the causes of subluxation, primarily what we're talking about is stresses. And there are physical stresses, there are emotional stresses, and there are biochemical stresses. And what I want to talk to you about is the main stress hormone that we have in your body is cortisol. And this is very important to know. So if we have, when cortisol is released, do you think it will increase or decrease our heart rate and blood pressure? So it'll increase our heart rate and blood pressure because it's getting our body ready to run. It's all about fight or flight. At the opposite end of that though, it will also decrease the nerve supply and the blood supply to our digestive organs, because digestion is not an important factor when really all we need to do is run to get out of danger. So with that, if we take that further, we think about your blood sugar levels. It's going to increase your blood sugar levels because it wants to mobilize blood sugars so you've got the energy to move. It's also going to increase our cholesterol because cholesterol is actually for wound healing. So your cholesterol levels will go up. Your blood clotting will go up. Even your pain sensitivity will increase as well. And at the same time, you will start to lose calcium as calcium is mobilized from your bones into the blood supply for the muscles to contract. So if we think about this in terms of a chronic state of stress, because if you're like the people that I see in my clinic, the majority of people that we see have stress that is going on over time. And it's not stress where it's something that's going to go away over a day or two. It's something that is often ongoing and something that we can't really resolve. So if you think about that ongoing stress, if that increases your heart rate, increases your blood pressure, obviously for a long period of time, that can predispose you to further problems like stroke and like heart disease. And if we think about increased blood sugars, obviously that can drive us towards things like diabetes. And then we look at blood clotting problems and increase in pain sensitivity. So we're looking at a lot of the chronic problems that people come across in terms of lifestyle diseases are drastically impacted by the increase in our cortisol. And so what we're going to talk about is things that we can do to decrease this cortisol response and make sure that your body is not reacting in this way. And one of the main factors is that your cerebellum is really responsible for decreasing this stress response. Your cerebellum is the most primitive part of your brain, and it needs one thing for stimulation. It needs movement. And once that movement is detected in your joints, in the different joints in your body, that causes your cerebellum to really fire and to improve its function. And so if we're not getting enough movement, then our body will stay in that state of distress and that state of stress. So the stimulation of your cerebellum, there's 800 times more receptors from your spine to your cerebellum than there is from the rest of your body. So being adjusted and making sure that your spine and nervous system is functioning well has a dramatic effect on this overall stress response. So let's talk a little bit more about the 5 factors, the 5 things that we need to do in order to minimize that stress response and also to make sure that you're having a good, functional and healthy life. So the first one is exercise. And so obviously we all know that we need to exercise. How often do we need to exercise? So we need to exercise every day. And how long do we need to exercise for? So we're told half an hour. And really those statistics, they come from the early 70s, where they really looked at, okay, what's the minimum we can get people to exercise for that will reduce the amount that we're spending on heart disease and those types of chronic diseases. So realistically, you know, we've gone from moving all day, every day, to pretty much not moving very much at all. And so one of the things that we want to focus on is you getting more movement, because that's going to stimulate your spine. It's going to stimulate the part of your brain that drives down this stress response. So ideally you want to exercise first thing in the morning before you've had breakfast. This helps your body to be able to regulate your blood sugars. So that regulation of your blood sugars is very, very important. And we want to exercise in a way that has an increase and a decrease in tempo. So what we talk about is, we talk about peak type of exercise, where what we're doing is we're exercising at about 80 to 90% of our maximum for 30 seconds, and then we're going down and exercising at around 40 to 50% of our maximum for 2 minutes. And we repeat that 8 times. So you're only exercising at that maximum rate for about 4.5 minutes, but we know that this is equivalent to at least an hour, sometimes up to an hour and 20 minutes of normal exercise. So you can do this walking. You can walk fast and walk slow. If you're fit, you can run fast and run slow. You can ride a bike. You could do it doing push-ups and walking on the spot. You could do burpees and walk on the spot. You could do it vacuuming and then do push-ups. Whatever it is, but try and incorporate that interval exercise as much as possible. Now that exercise is going to help you to decrease your body's inflammation, which is a major driver towards those chronic pain responses. Now, the next thing that we talk about is nutrition. Now, you need to know that what you put into your mouth is going to be with you for the next 6 to 7 years, in terms of it being a makeup of the part of our body. So if we're eating McDonald's hamburgers all day, every day, we're going to be pretty much made of McDonald's hamburgers. So with nutrition, there are some things that we recommend around your chiropractic care that we know are vitally important. So the first one is making sure that we're getting enough omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are important for decreasing inflammation. They're important for your brain's connections as well, and they also help the function of all of the cells in your body. All the cells in your body have a fatty layer, and the omega-3s make up a part of that. So omega-3s dramatically drive down inflammation, which can lead to pain and joint problems, but it also helps your brain to make new connections. So if you have chronic pain, if you've been in pain for longer than 4 to 6 weeks, your brain has now made a lot of connections associating that part of your body with pain, to the point where the initial problem may well have healed, but your brain still perceives that there is pain there. And that's what chronic pain is. So omega-3s, along with different movement, including your adjustments and the exercise, will help your brain to realize that there is no longer pain there, and that will help to drive you away from that chronic pain response. So the other things that we need to look at in terms of nutrition are, in terms of if we need to look at a way to look at the way that we eat, so you want to try and focus on eating fresh fiber first. So what we want you to do is at the start of every meal, you're going to eat something that is fresh and fibrous. So my son, he only likes green apples. I think he's just starting to eat red apples now. He's 13. But green apples, so we will cut him up a green apple that he will eat before virtually every meal. So it could be that when you have dinner, you just eat your salad and your vegetables first. But what this does is we're eating something that is high in water content. So it means that we're not going to overeat because we're thirsty, which often happens. But also the fiber within those fruits and vegetables helps to work almost like an intestinal broom. It stimulates your digestive area, and this is where over 80% of our immune system comes from, as well as obviously improving your gut function and improving the way that you absorb whatever else you're eating afterwards. So really we should look at the palm method. So what we want to do is eat a piece of protein that is the size of our palm. We want to eat our fruits and vegetables the size of our hand, and you want to eat good fats in the size of your finger. Okay? Now, in terms of nutrition, there are certain things, particularly around omega-3s, that make a big difference. So if an animal is fed with grain, it has far less omega-3s than something that is fed on grass or fed naturally. And that's why grass-fed beef is so much better for you than grain-reared beef. So it is much, much higher in omega-3s and much higher in protein content. And it's the same in terms of free-range eggs. If you look at the yolk of free-range eggs, they're a deeper yellow than cage-reared eggs that have a lighter yellow because they have less of those good fats. So we want to focus on foods that are good in those fats and focus on having protein early in the day. If you've gone overnight and you wake up and then you have a piece of toast, you'll burn through those carbohydrates quickly, and that signals to your brain that there's not a lot of food around, not a lot of quality food. So the next time you eat, your body will want to actually store that as fat. And so often we can get into that cycle where we're getting fluctuations in our blood sugars, and our body is storing everything because it's concerned about where the next meal is going to come from. Obviously, there are things that we can do that help to stabilize those blood sugars, and one of them is doing some intermittent fasting in terms of going for sustained periods of fasting. But that's something that really we should talk to you on an individual basis. So if you're concerned or if you're thinking about changing your diet, definitely come and talk to us, and we're happy to talk through the different options that we know scientifically can actually make a difference to your diet. Now, a lot of people ask me, okay, so what supplements should I be taking? Now, if you look at supplementation, the one thing is, if you have a supplement for something that your body already has enough of, then realistically, if you've got enough vitamin C and you're taking more, that just goes straight out of your body. So you're literally wasting your money. If you have a varied diet that has a broad amount of different colored foods in it, and you're eating a good source of protein, a good source of carbohydrates and fats, there's only 2, maybe 3 supplements that you will actually need to have. And that's based on what classically people used to get in terms of what we used to get from our nutrition when it was optimal. So omega-3s is the first one. And so what you need to do is we need to have at least 2,000 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids a day. And with that, when you get the bottle or whatever it is that you're having, look on the back of the bottle, and you need to look at how much EPA and DHA is in each omega-3 tablet or each mil, and it's those numbers that need to add up to the total that you have. If you go to Coles and get, your Coles brand, you'll have a look and it will say 1,000 milligrams, but on the back it might say there's 80 milligrams of EPA and 60 milligrams of DHA, and so you're taking a substantial amount of those compared to something that might be more expensive but actually has much, much higher levels. The next supplement that we believe that people need to supplement is vitamin D. Now, vitamin D works more like a hormone than a vitamin. It's involved in the production of hundreds of different genes in our body. It's very important for heart health, very important for mood. Now, in order to get enough vitamin D, you need to be lying out and getting sun at the middle of the day to a substantial amount of your body. In other words, you need to be out in shorts or t-shirts or out in your swimwear. And a lot of us don't have time to do that. So for the vitamin D, all we do is we get a couple of drops. It's best if it's in the drop form. You put it onto your skin and it's activated when it goes onto your skin, and then you lick it off so it's absorbed straight into your blood supply because it is degraded by your stomach acid. So they're the only supplements that really the majority of us need to take. Obviously, if you're deficient in things, we're happy to talk to you about those. Now, in terms of rest, how much rest do you actually need? Now, some people need only 5 or 6 hours. Some people need 10. So it's not the same for everyone, but there are a number of factors that will make a big difference to the quality of the sleep that you get. Now, in terms of finding out about that quality, what you can do is get an app on your phone and just literally have your phone on your bed, and your phone will monitor the movement that you have during the night. And the ideal is for us to sleep in a roughly 90-minute cycle of sleep. So we go down into a deep REM sleep where we're paralyzed and we can't move, and then we come up out of that sleep and we're a bit restless for a little while, and then we go back down into a deeper sleep. So we know that the REM sleep that we get earlier in the night before 12 o'clock is much, much more effective than the REM sleep that we get after 12 o'clock. And so getting a good full cycle before 12 o'clock is crucial, particularly for children. So in terms of things that we can do that can help with that process, so the first thing is that your room should be totally dark. There should be no light, because the light will affect how your brain actually gets into that deeper REM sleep. We need to get away from light before we go to sleep. So get away from your phone and get away from the television, as that high bright flicker rate tells your brain that it's the middle of the day. And so that's where you'll have troubles actually getting into that deeper sleep as quickly as you should do. So we should sleep in a cool room, and you should sleep in a way that you can regulate your temperature well. So ideally naked, but with socks on. So the reason we ask you to put socks on is that cold peripheries can often wake you during the night, and you'll be waking wondering why you're awake or why you're not able to sleep as well, and often it's that you've got cold peripheries. So the room should be totally dark. You should sleep in a way that you can regulate your temperature. And the other thing is you need to have good support. Now, all of these fancy beds that cost thousands and thousands of dollars, most of them are gimmicks. If your bed is older than 7 to 8 years old, yes, you may need a new bed. But one of the things, so if you're particularly slight and you've got a lot of bony prominences, then yes, a pillow top can make a difference. A sheepskin is even better in terms of giving you that cushioning. Or if you feel your partner moving around and you feel like you're out on the ocean, then that's a chance where you may need to get a new bed. If you're on a slat bed, you can always turn the slats over and move the slats around so that the slats are not fatiguing and causing your mattress to sag like that. So always come and talk to us about beds. In terms of pillows, if you sleep purely on your side, then a contoured pillow is a good idea. If you go from your back to your side, then often you'll need a different sized pillow to give you the support that you need when you're on your side compared to the small support that you need when you're on your back. So there are water pillows that you can get that have water inside, and they work really well in terms of adapting and giving you that support. But again, if you're thinking about getting a new pillow, come and talk to us. So the second last one is a healthy mental attitude. Now, what do you think actually makes us happier? Do you think winning the lotto would make you happy? Well, we know from research that the vast majority of people who win the lotto, their general level of happiness is exactly the same 12 to 18 months later as it was before the big win. And it's also people that have gone through tragedy, people who lose a limb, or people that are involved in a horrific accident. Their general level of happiness tends to go and stay fairly stable. But there are certain things that we know can make a difference to your level of happiness. So the first one is actually being involved in processes where you're helping other people. We know that helping other people increases your level of happiness to a much greater extent and for a much more long-lasting time frame than the actual event goes for. So if you're interested in finding out ways that you can improve your level of happiness, there's a term that's called flow, and this was brought about by a man named Martin Seligman, and he has a website called Authentic Happiness. If you Google that, there are actually tests that you can do all for free that will show you your strengths and different factors that we know if you work towards those will actually enable you to be happier in the long term. We know that people that are involved in processes or involved in things that they do every day to the point where they lose a sense of time, where you're that immersed in the process that you lose a sense of time, that is what really builds resilience and builds happiness throughout your life. And the last thing of these 5 factors is a sound central nervous system. And this is really why coming to the chiropractor and making sure that your nervous system is functioning optimally makes a massive difference to your and your family's long-term health.